What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 4040 Vision podcast. I am your host, Khaled Abdallah, and I'm joined today by a special guest, Blaise Nealon, the cycling advisor and host of the Bourbon Bikes and Business podcast. How's everything going today, Blaise?
Great. Good afternoon, Khaled. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for coming on. So today's topic is about all things cycling, about Blaise's cycling adventures, his 20-year-long journey into this sport. We're going to talk about, how folks can get into this sport if they wanted to. And of course, Blaise is going to tell us a lot of great stories about his cycling adventures. First, before we get started, I have to say you have an incredible name for someone that races. Is that on purpose?
No, it's actually a saint's name, Blessing of the Throats. I'm a Catholic. February 3rd is St. Blaise's Day. That's where I got the
Wow,
name.
okay.
Yeah.
So it's just it's fate that
Yep.
your Blaise is blazing past the competition. So let's talk about it. How did you first get into cycling, and when did you get into cycling?
Wow, that's an easy one. I'm a little bit
Yeah.
older and I started late. So I got divorced about 20 years ago and I needed something for therapy, going through that life-changing event. So I went out and I bought two LL Bean hybrid bikes. I think they were like $300 each. So you say, why did I buy two? Well, one for me. And I figured if I met somebody, maybe they could ride with me, right? Well, I hardly ever used the
Smart to
second
plan
one.
ahead, yeah.
I used the second one once with my rebound relationship, and that was about it. It sat in the garage for years. But so that's how I got into it. I started, 1 mile, and I went 2 miles, and I went 3 miles and 4 miles. So tip number one, start slow. Don't go out and kill yourself trying to do 10 miles or 20 miles if you've never ridden before. But that's why I got into it. And, it was meditation. I'm also a fly fisherman. It's like, I guess, tell the story. When I step onto a stream to go fishing, my world shuts off. I just forget about everything. And when I hop on a bike and start riding, same thing. Whatever was going on in my life and that day just takes me right out there. It's gone, wiped out.
So kind of the solitude aspect of it, part of
Yeah,
it as well.
it's like my meditation, my spirituality, my church. It's just like, it just clears the mind for anybody that, and we all need that these days with the craziness going on in the world, right?
Yeah, everybody needs their outlets, and hopefully, in your case, it's definitely a healthy outlet. So,
Yeah.
did you try anything else, or was it just I need something? And did you ever cycle before? Did
I
you do spin
did probably
classes
as
or
a
what? Like,
kid.
okay,
Actually, it was this big gap. I probably cycled up until I left for college when I was young. And I didn't ride a bike for almost 20 years, 15, 20 years. And then I just, I need to do something. I want to get in shape. I want to have a good head, keep my mind. So it helped a lot. I started with a hybrid. And I met someone, they said, why don't you try a road bike? I was riding mostly in the woods on trails. Okay. I got on the road bike. I was like, oh, this goes fast. This is great. I got to get a road bike. So then I got a road bike and I rode on the roads for years and years. And then in recent years, probably in 2018, I went back because I lived real close to the C&O Canal. I'm actually in the mid-Atlantic states, about halfway between Baltimore and Washington, D.C. So I have the C&O Canal, which is a famous trail that goes from DC to Pittsburgh. And so I ride that. It's 5 miles from the house. So that's typically where you find me most days on the C&O Canal. So in the last couple of years, I do more gravel, bike packing, and I travel around the country. I always have, just going to different events and things. So
yeah, definitely want to hear more about that. So,
yeah.
if you could talk to yourself, back then, or someone else that wants to get into cycling at a decent level, what's required? What's the first, I don't know, 3 or 4 things that they would need to buy, and what kind of investment does it take to do this, pretty regularly?
I get asked this question quite a lot from a lot of people that I know, or like you said, just wanting to get into it. And the first bit of advice, most important, I'd say go to your local bike shop and say, hey, I want to get into biking. They'll ask you several questions. Well, what kind of biking you want to do? I don't know. I probably ride here or there, right?
Yeah.
So talk to a bike shop owner. They're going to sit you on a couple different kinds of bikes, depending on what you tell them you want to do. And nowadays, I recommend getting a hybrid. And what's a hybrid? It's a cross between, you can ride on the roads, you can ride on a gravel, you can ride on a trail. There's so many options with bikes these days. and I'll talk about it at the end. I've got some tips on how to find a good bike and where to look for
Yeah,
these
for
things.
sure.
But go to a bike shop, ride a couple bikes, listen to them, maybe go to a couple different bike shops, try a couple brands. Investment wise, like I said, when I got into it, I think I spent 200-300 bucks. Now, that was a long time ago, but still today, you don't have to spend thousands of dollars to get into biking. A lot of people think that I got to have this expensive bike. I
Yeah.
always say ride whatever you have or ride whatever you can afford. If it's 300, 400, $500, go buy a used bike. Google used bike store near me. There's tons of, I know a guy in town here. He takes in old bikes, rehabs them, and sells them for a real reasonable rate. So, and start there, because you don't want to spend a lot of money and then find out, "Oh, I really don't want to do this," right? It's like
Yeah,
anything else.
very
You
true.
wouldn't buy a Harley, you buy something smaller and work your way up to the Harley or whatever, right? See if you like to ride a motorcycle and feel comfortable doing it. Um, so start simple. Um, Find some people that are knowledgeable to hang out with, network with, a group online. Most bike shops have groups of people that ride together. That's another thing you'll find out. So, and there's new people. I ride with new people and people that have been riding a long time all the time. I love educating people on what I do and giving tips like we're doing today. So,
Yeah, I definitely want
yeah,
to hear more about like the community that you've been able to tap into. You mentioned like traveling around the country, and
right.
I'm sure you do that with some folks that you've met in this community. But yeah, the choice, you're kind of you're it's analysis, it's paralysis by analysis. Like you
Oh,
like,
like
oh,
everything.
I moved recently. I live on by a river, and there's a nice paved trail that goes a couple miles up to the city and back. And I'm like, I would love to bike this. And I have an older bike, and I'm like, I want to get a newer bike, but there's so many choices. And like you said,
Yeah.
you can find stuff that's, a couple $1,000s or a couple $100, or you can get a free junker on Facebook
Yeah,
Marketplace or
I
whatever.
I
So,
think the other important
you know,
thing is going to the bike shop, even if
yeah.
you have an existing bike, the key is to make sure it fits you right. A lot of people hop on a bike and their legs are out like this because they're not fitted right. The seat's not the right height, the handlebars are not the right height. So if you do that and you go for a 5 mile ride, your knees will hurt like you know what, you'll never ride again. So
Hmm.
that's the other reason to go to the bike shop. Get a bike fit on your existing bike or whatever you're going to buy. Get a bike fit, and you'll use a lot less energy. You'll feel good. Your knees won't hurt. Your back won't hurt. And so that's another tip on
Yeah,
starting
for
out.
sure. No, that's great advice. I'm definitely gonna do that at some point, especially when it starts to get a little warmer and
Hmm.
drier out here. And I'm gonna do that. So, I mean, how much do you spend at this point? You don't have to tell me exact dollar amounts, but I'm curious for someone that's I think
Oh,
you're definitely past the level of like a hobbyist or like a weekend warrior. It seems like
right.
you do this more often than that. So
I
like a
still feel like
serious
a weekend
cyclist.
warrior. That's how I
Okay.
define myself. But I don't race professionally. I race rides occasionally. I do a lot of rides around the country. This time of year, I'm planning with my cohort, like, where are we going to ride this year? What's a good trip to do? So it's setting a goal for this year, and we look online, see what events there are. So
Mhm.
for me, investment per year, it's not that high because I've invested a lot already, but
Yeah, yeah.
I've bought bikes that were $1,000. I've bought bikes that were probably the most expensive was up around 7,000, you know, and then somebody ran me into a tree and cracked the frame.
Oh man.
The funny time when that happened, I was out of work, so that really pissed me off because, my mental state was not good already, and then I didn't have my bike to ride.
Yeah, that's
But
always the fear, right? You want to, at least for me, if I was going to do that, I would try to stay as far away from cars
yeah,
as possible.
I've cracked 3 frames now over the years, and that's another tip. Find a reputable brand of bike that will do what's called a crash replacement or give you a free
Oh,
frame if
okay.
something happens to it. Like Specialized, who I had 2 of those bikes with, they'll do what's called a crash replacement. Now, they won't give it to you for free, but you'll get it for a third of what a new one would cost. But if you have an accident with it, you'll get a crash replacement warranty, which I did twice
Wow.
with them over the years. And then Salsa, my most recent bike, I think I had it for 18 months. And just recently, I had 8,000 miles on it. And I called them up and I said, "Hey, the paint's fading on this really bad." He goes, "Well, we have lifetime warranty. If you want us to, we'll give you a new frame." They sent me a brand new frame. And
Wow.
that was a several $1,000 bike. So I got a brand
Does
new.
that Is
You're
that
newer.
only if you buy it new, or if you buy
Yeah,
a
that's if you
used
buy it
bike?
new. You got to buy it new.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But the bike before this, I bought used. I bought it on Facebook Marketplace from a guy in Tennessee. Um, and that's another topic we talk about on a recent podcast. You know,
Mhm.
do you buy it online? Do you buy it at a bike shop? If you're new, again, the bike shop is going to be your best bet. If you're a veteran like me, you know the bike brands, you know the geometry. You've done a lot of research. Like my recent bike, I was looking for one for 6 months. I knew what I wanted. I wanted to get something to do more gravel, bike packing, something I could ride on the road occasionally. So I came up with Salsa, makes something called a Cutthroat. Actually, it was designed to ride what's called the Tour Divide, which goes from Banff, Canada, all the way to Mexico, like 3,000
Wow.
miles. So, you know, I want to do more adventure riding, which takes me to probably my longest ride was to date is probably 330 miles in 4 days. I rode across Maryland by myself in four
Wow.
days. And we're planning a trip to ride across Pennsylvania this summer. It's got like 28,000 feet of
It's a
climb
big
over a
state.
lot of mountains. Yeah, it's got how many? I think it's 400 miles in four
So you ride through the
days.
Poconos?
No, this is more central. We'll start in New York and ride south to Maryland, but still,
Oh, okay.
you're
Okay.
going through over a lot of mountains.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I used to live in Pennsylvania and in Philadelphia, and
Oh,
we've
really? That's where I grew
driven
up. I
across a
grew up
couple
in the
times.
Poconos, near the Poconos where I
I
grew
was
up.
gonna say, from your accent, I was like, I think you're from Delco or
Nazareth, Pennsylvania,
Pennsylvania.
home of
Yeah.
Mario Andretti and Martin Guitar. That's where I'm
Okay.
from.
All right.
Yeah,
So okay, so I was spot on with my accent detection. So,
that's funny.
uh, yeah. So you said you did a 330-mile race in 4 days. How do
It was just
you?
decided to do it. I did the research. I had my
Yeah.
girlfriend drop me off in West Virginia, and I rode each day. A couple days I stayed at bed and breakfast. One night I camped. One night I stayed at my house because I was coming past my house halfway through the state.
Sure. Sure.
And then the last day, I think I rode 104 miles from Northeast Maryland all the way down the other side of Chesapeake Bay to Lewis, Delaware. And that was a funny story. I ran out of water after 60 miles, and I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to make it. And I'm going through these chicken farms. These trucks with chickens were almost passing me, running me over. And I finally found this little restaurant in Delaware. I got some water. Thank God. I didn't think I was going to make it, but I made it.
So how do you prepare for a race like that? Do you like build up to it? How
Yeah,
how much time do you spend like mapping it out and
I'm a
physically and
YouTube
mentally
junkie. I
preparing for that?
research things. I'm very detail oriented. I like to research stuff. So, today online you can watch YouTube videos on anything, but typically I'll do the research, watch some other people that have ridden the area. Now, I mapped out my own ride in Maryland. I knew a lot of the roads, not all of them, but being from Maryland for a long time. But even that, I hit some unexpected things doing that trip. So you have to train. I ride typically 3-4 days a week. I typically ride, depending on the time of year, anywhere from 70 to 150 miles a week is typical what I ride. And last year I signed up this time of year to ride something called Unbound in Kansas. So you have to get in a
What's that
lot.
like? Yeah, tell us about
It's
that.
the largest gravel race in North America. So people come from all around the world to out in the middle of nowhere in Kansas. They have these gravel roads, wide open spaces, cattle running across the road, going through creeks. And you sign up and they have a 50, 100, and even a 350-mile gravel race that they race all night long through the night.
Wow.
No matter what, thunderstorms, lightning, whatever, you're out there riding. So I went in easy on the 50-mile. I think it took me 3 hours and so to do it, but it was one of the fastest rides I ever did. So I trained around here on a couple of mountains. It was a little hilly, but the thing is, there's really sharp gravel. A lot of people get flat tires. You got to change your own tire if you get a flat, to get to the finish. You have to hydrate. That's another thing. You have to learn to take in water and food while you're riding when you do these long rides so that you
Yeah,
don't what
yeah.
they call bonk or, run out and cramp or anything like that. So there's a lot of science behind it. And again, just over years of experience of knowing what to do, I automatically drink every 10 minutes. Or, I drink, 26 ounces every 15 miles. So, I
Okay.
have
So there's
two
some
bottles. I
real
can go
like
30 miles before I have to stop and refill up, or if I do a
okay. So
long
there's some
trip,
real math going
yeah, I
in
had
there,
like
right?
5 bottles of water, so I could go 60 miles without stopping. like I said, but then I ran out of water at 60 miles because there was no water to get. That's true.
This might be TMI, but are you peeing while you're still on the bike, or are
No,
you
believe it or
stopping for
not,
that?
you
Okay.
sweat. You're sweating it out, is what it is. Especially in the summertime, it
Okay.
just goes out your
Yeah.
pores. I mean, eventually you're going to stop at some point, but it's not like because you're over drinking, you're stopping more to go. But it pretty much sweats out of your pores.
Okay. Because I have a buddy that does ultra marathons,
Oh yeah,
and
it's
he's told
crazy.
me that people will just pee while they're
Yeah, don't do that.
you
No,
know,
I'll
mid
stop.
stride.
No,
You
I'll
know,
stop. in a,
they'll only stop if they have to
in a
poop.
cornfield or
But
something, depending where
yeah,
you're
yeah,
at.
exactly, or in the mountains somewhere. Uh, I want to talk about the mental aspect of that. I mean, obviously, the physical fatigue is, I'm sure a big issue with cramps and just
Yeah,
dealing with everything, being on a bike for 30, 40, 50 miles at a time.
right.
What is that mental aspect like? Are you listening to music? Are you listening to a podcast, an
I used
audiobook?
I
Like,
used
how do
to
you stay
years ago.
focused?
I would have earbuds, but I found it unsafe, especially on the road. So,
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
occasionally if I want to have an odd day, I'll stick my earbuds in. But now I ride on trails in the woods. I'll take my chances with the trees versus cars. I broke 5 ribs on the right side a couple of years ago. This is a funny story. So my girlfriend's in the hospital, right? So I stayed overnight in the hospital. She said, "Go home and feed the cat." All right. September, 70 degrees. I go home, feed the cat. I'll go for a short ride. I didn't even get a football field from the house. I hit a pothole, flipped over my handlebars, and
Oh no.
broke 5 ribs. I'm in a different hospital than she is. She was not happy when she got out of the hospital because I wasn't there to take care of her. I'm in another hospital with 5 broken ribs.
Yeah, that
So,
that might be a deal breaker.
but back to your question about it is mental when you get in these longer rides. I typically ride 30, 40 miles on a clip most days when I'm riding. But if I'm doing 60, 50, or I'm doing a race, even with Unbound, that's nonstop, 50 miles. You're going as fast as you can. So you have to be drinking. You have to. So I practiced last year being down in my drops because I knew it was going to be windy out there. And that helped me a lot. So I knew what the circumstances were going to be of the race, and I practiced it for 6 months to get in shape. Actually, my co-host on the podcast, Hank, was my first coach to my first 100-mile bike ride, which we did around Lake Tahoe. So we did it with Team in
That must
Training.
have been so beautiful.
Oh,
That
it's
area is
gorgeous.
just gorgeous.
So,
Yeah.
I had to raise like 5,000 miles and then I got a free trip out to Tahoe. But I met Hank. He was like a coach that we worked with for, I think, 5 months. So we were training. I'd never done 100 miles. I don't think I did more than 50. So there I was eating jelly beans right around Lake Tahoe. That was my nutrition back then. But, learn how to drink and train and ride. But back to your question about mental, I mean, it goes back to why I ride. Meditation. I always joke, I ride to eat. I like to eat good food. So
Sure,
riding,
sure.
if you're exercising, you can eat better. You still want to eat healthy, obviously. But the other reasons I ride is my back is screwed up because I had a motorcycle. I've only ever been to the hospital twice in my life. Once with the 5 broken ribs, and once when I was 26. I came home from Bermuda. My brother gave me his rocket ship motorcycle. I went for a ride. I went over the handlebars of that, 116 miles an
Oh,
hour, rolled
wow.
down the highway. Didn't break anything, but lost a lot of skin. So I always had a bad back for a while. I went to a chiropractor for years, but I found this is really interesting. This summer, I was riding with 2 doctors from North Carolina. They were up here riding on the CNOs, friends of mine. And one was a back surgeon. I didn't know him, but I did after the trip. And I said, "Hey, why is it that when I ride my bike, my back doesn't hurt? But if I don't ride for 3 weeks, I get nasty, my back hurts."
Tightens up. Yeah.
Yeah, he says it's because the endorphins from riding a bike stimulate the muscle, the growth around your spine, and it strengthens it. If you don't ride, you're not getting those endorphins. It's not strengthening the muscles around your spine, and you're going to have issues. So, people with back issues, which are a lot of Americans these days,
Yeah.
bike riding can be really good for you. And bike riding is also good for runners that can't run anymore. They got knee issues or other issues. It's less, my girlfriend's a runner. I can't run a mile. I could ride 100, but I won't. I hate
Wow.
running a mile. I can't even run a mile. She's a marathon runner. She's done like 10 marathons. But anyway, so the point is, it's good for you, even if you have certain injuries. And even after the 5 broken ribs, I think I was off the bike longest ever. It was 3 months, maybe. It took me about 6 months to heal them to grow back because I busted them all apart.
Mhm.
My first ride was at Gettysburg Battlefield in February, and it was covered with ice. So I was out riding my
You're a
bike.
risk taker.
Yeah. I always joke if I'm going to fall again, I have to fall to the left, right? So I don't break the right side. Um, anyway,
But how do you occupy your mind for you said the meditation? Are you just,
I
you know,
just,
in
I,
your own head? Like,
part of the reason, like I said, I like riding in the woods or on a trail anymore versus the road. The roads become very dangerous. I know a lot of people have been killed
mhm.
on the roads because people texting, they weren't doing that
Yeah,
10
yeah.
years ago, 15 years ago as much. But, you know, in where I ride, I see deer, I see blue heron, I see bald eagles, I see foxes run through the woods. I'm riding along a beautiful river. It's just so peaceful. I lost my mom about 8 years ago, and I think of my mom, and when I think of her, I see a hawk every time. So there'll be a red-tailed hawk will be cruising in the woods right next to me or coming over top of me within 2 minutes of thinking of her. So she's my, there's a serious connect. And I had a great relationship with my mom. I think that's part of it. I have a really strong
Mhm.
connection with her, and she shows up when I think of her. But it's just so calming. You feel good. Some days are better than others. Some days you're like, oh,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't, I don't feel that great today. I feel like I'm working really hard to go 10 miles, and other days I don't even think about it. I always say I take 15 miles just to warm up. It takes me a while to get into that groove. But once I hit 10, 15 miles, I'm not even thinking about my legs. I'm just looking at the environment. I'm relaxing. The other thing is I usually ride by myself most times, believe it or not.
Mhm.
Occasionally, I do rides with other groups around the area, or if I go to an event, I'm riding with a big group. Or, a buddy of mine, we've done bike packing trips. We went down to West Virginia last year. We saw a black bear or riding along the trail in West Virginia. Um, so it's just, and I think what's cool about bike riding, I could say it's about my latest bike is I named it, I think it's Vigatero, which in
Okay.
Italian means adventurer. So it's all about the
Yeah.
adventure. It's
Mhm.
not about the destination, even though you set a destination. It's about what happens along the way, the people you meet, the places you go. That's the beauty about bike riding. I've met so many cool people traveling the world. I've done bike rides in San Diego. I did I think when I was 50, I did a ride for diabetes. You do rides to raise money for different causes, which is cool.
Oh,
I
that's
got
really cool.
lost in a polo grounds in out by Torrey Pines, a famous golf course. But I got off track and I ended up being in a polo ground with horses. I'm like, I'm lost.
That must
So
have been fun at least,
yeah,
yeah.
it was. Yeah. So I've done one of my goals is to do a bike ride race in every state before I die. I think I'm probably three-quarters of the way there. So I'm
Okay.
always looking for new places to ride, new adventures. Um, I did a this is a funny story. I did a ride with my friend Hank and it was his idea to do a bike packing trip. And get this, he's never done a bike packing trip where you load all your gear, you camp. So we are going
Yeah,
to
yeah.
camp overnight in the Smoky Mountains. So this is crazy. We set
This
out
is in Tennessee, right?
in Tennessee.
Tennessee.
Actually, it was in North Carolina. We went into Tennessee where the Smokies are. We're riding for like 11 hours. We haven't seen a person all day. We finally come down a mountain. We found one store hoping they'd have sandwiches. They didn't even have sandwiches. So like your SOL and lunch for that. So 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we come down the mountain. There's like 4,000 rafters in some river in this little town. We did get a sandwich. Then we take off up another mountain to climb. We were climbing and climbing, and like we're like, how far is it to where we're going to this campground on top of the next mountain? So we finally see a UPS truck driver out in the middle of nowhere come down a gravel road. Say, hey, do you know where this campground is? He goes, that's over the next ridge, and I think
Mhm.
it's closed because of the bears. I'm like, and then my buddy Hake's like, "Are you kidding me? Now what are we gonna do? Our car's like the next state over." So a little while later, I said, "Calm down, we'll get there. Don't worry." I'm the easygoing person.
Yeah,
He's
you're the
freaking
even
out.
keel guy.
He's freaking out. And then here's this lady walking down. I think she was out for a jog or so. We said, "How you doing today?" "Hey, we're trying to get here. What do we do for a night? Any suggestions?" "Well, if you guys want to camp in my front yard, that's fine." So she let us set up camp in her front yard. Next thing you know, this is like 7 o'clock at night. We've been riding for 11 hours. And all her neighbors, her brother, her uncle, the whole neighbors in the holler are all coming down to see us. I think her brother was a volunteer firefighter. So by 10
They
o'clock at
probably don't
night,
get many visitors at that point, right?
yeah, right.
In
Like
that
with these crazy guys out in the middle of nowhere, right? She was actually a ER, what do you call it? Like the shock trauma nurse from Johnsonville,
Okay.
Tennessee. But anyway, long story short, they ended up driving us over 2 mountain ranges at 10 o'clock at night to get our car, and then we drove our cars back to their house. I think we got in at 1 in the morning, we camped, and we got out of that situation. So there was a case, we never made our destination, but it was all about this crazy trip of trying to get to where we wanted to go to camp, which we never
Yeah,
did.
that sounds like a lot of fun. There's a couple things that I wanted to ask
Go
about. I
ahead.
mean,
Shoot.
you talked about the meditation, the aspect of riding through nature and things
Yeah.
like that. Like, does it feel like a spiritual experience? I don't know if you're a spiritual person, but does it feel like a spiritual
Oh,
experience when you're
yeah.
riding,
Definitely. And
out in the
again, every
woods?
day is different. I ride all year round. I ride in the cold. I've learned if you have the right gear, you can ride anywhere, any time of year. I hate the cold actually, but if you ride the right gear, merino wool, good socks, good jersey and stuff. But even I'll ride the C&O trail all year round. It's different every time I go out. Like sometimes I'll see deer everywhere. I was out the other day. I didn't see a deer all day. So, but springtime, the flowers are coming up. Snow. I've ridden in the snow out along the river. It's just beautiful. Um, so it's it no matter what it is, even on a bad day, even though I don't feel good, I feel great. I always feel better after I do a ride. Some days I'll ride early in the morning, depending on the year. Some days I'll ride at lunchtime. Some days I'll ride late at night, depending on temperature or what it's like. Trying to avoid the rain. Occasionally I'll ride in the rain. But I've ridden in Vermont in a pouring rainstorm. I've ridden other places in pouring rain and had fun. It's just like it doesn't matter. It's just cool. But it's good for the mind, good for the heart, good for the soul, good for your body. I, I can't find anything bad about bike riding. It's always been good to me. I I always said I'll ride till as long as I can. Cycling
Get
is
it out.
definitely a spiritual thing for your head, mind, body, all the way around, in my opinion. Um, Again, if you're getting into it, make sure you get your bike set up right. You don't have to spend a lot of money. Um, find people that are knowledgeable nearby you and hang out with them
Hmm.
virtually or in person. Generally, I haven't found many cyclists that are nasty, bad people. They're usually really nice people. Most of them want to help you with knowledge, whether they've been doing it for years or they're just starting. Even I always have, and I'm like a sponge. I'm
Yeah.
always asking a million questions about how do you do this or where do you get that or whatever.
Yeah, it seems like a really welcoming
Hmm.
community. Um, what's the biggest challenge or hurdle that you've had to overcome in one of these like longer endurance races? Was it mechanical, physical, mental?
Longest. I've had long rides I did in the summer that were races, and I cramped up and I was laying along the road screaming because both my legs were in knots. It was like somebody stopped and ripped my legs and got me back on the bike and going. That's not fun when that happens to you. I did a ride in Texas with Lance Armstrong once. Same thing. I laid down and somebody else was laying there too, and there were fire ants along in the ground biting
Oh no.
the heck out of you. Oh my god, that was nasty. But generally, I don't think I really had a really bad. I mean, when I did the bike across Maryland, that was very mental. You're tired because you're riding and And my friend told me he's a ultra cyclist, an ultra marathon runner. He says, "Just remember, Blaise, keep pedaling. Doesn't matter what.
Okay.
Just keep." And I had that in my head the whole time I was riding across the state, whether I was climbing up a big mountain or tired or hungry or whatever. Keep pedaling.
Yeah, that sounds like a
That's a
mantra. Just
mantra
keep
for
repeating.
and you'll get through it. And that's the thing. I think if you talk to anybody that does long races or rides, some of these long, like I mentioned, the one in Kansas, they do 350 miles. Some people don't finish it. They get a flat tire or mechanical and they're stuck, at a gas station. But
Hmm.
the guys that do, even the senior racers, you get professionals go out there and try to do this race. They say it's 80% mental, and they all go through a dark place for a while, and then you come out of it. So, like, if you just keep going, you'll come out of that dark place, whether it's pain, mental pain. You're sitting there crying, "What the heck am I doing here, doing this?"
Hmm.
And then 5 miles down the road, the sun will come out, and you'll feel better. It's just like
Yeah, yeah.
It's like life.
So what's his yeah, right? You just put your head down
Keep
and
going, keep
power
plugging
through it.
away.
Keep
Yeah,
pedaling. That's you should just did a bunch of t-shirts, just say keep pedaling.
exactly.
You mentioned that you wanted to do a race in every
Mhm.
state. Is there one in particular that you haven't done that you're like one day, it's a kind of a bucket list, like I want to do this one because of, the scenery or
Yeah,
whatever it is?
I want to ride what's called the Dolomite region in northern Italy. So there's
Oh,
this
okay.
I think it has 60 switchbacks that go like this all the way up the mountain, and it's a huge climb. I think the biggest mountain I ever did or climb was in Colorado. I did this like 4 years ago. I went out there for 2 weeks. My cousins there stayed, and I met up with somebody I met on Facebook, my friend, and she said, "Hey, why don't you stick around? We're going to ride Mount Evans, which is 14,000 feet, right?" I'm like, I
Wow.
don't know if I could do that. I was like, okay. And you got to get climatized to the altitude. So I think it was the second last day before I left. I was there 2 weeks, and I actually beat them to the top. But we started at 6,500, 7,000 feet in Evergreen, and we went up 6,600 feet in 33 miles to the
Wow.
top of that 14,000. And there was snow, at the top. This is in July. There's snow up on top of the mountain. There's wind, and it was the same thing. Just keep pedaling. It was like really slow going most of the way, but I made it up. And you know what? Going up wasn't the hard part. The hard part was actually coming down, because when you got up, we started, it was like 75,
Hmm.
80 degrees. We got to the top like 3 hours later, I guess, and it was 40 degrees with a 30-mile-an-hour wind. And
Wow.
and I had my wide wheels. So I'm up there. Thank God she told me to bring a vest and a jacket, which we put on the top. There's mountain goats up there and all these tourists. So I start down the mountain, and there's no guardrails. You go off the edge, you're like history. But
Yeah.
I'm riding this 30-mile-an-hour wind. I'm freezing my butt off, and I'm hugging the yellow line. There's cars coming at me, coming up. Like the first 5 miles was a little dicey getting down, and then halfway down the mountain, we saw a guy that passed out because of the altitude, and just he was laid out in the middle of the road. No cell signal. We couldn't even call an ambulance. So like I had to drive down the mountain before I get a signal and call an ambulance to go get him. But so like, yeah, stuff like that happens, but you get through it, and
Hmm.
it's stuck in my mind forever, that ride. Just like the ride in Tennessee, get lost in the middle of nowhere. I'll never forget it. So
That's a hell of an
yeah,
experience. Yeah.
it's fun. Call it a bucket list ride.
So yeah, one thing I'm curious about also is what's your recovery process like? Like, what steps do you take? Maybe not on the daily,
Yeah.
but if you really push yourself, how do you recover from that 1,500-mile ride?
That's a good topic. You learn more about this as you ride more. I use several things when I'm riding. I have a hydration mix in my water that puts electrolytes and salt into your body. Summertime, I take salt tablets, sodium, because you sweat out sodium out of your body.
Hmm.
That's what causes cramping. And then afterward, you can take what's called a recovery drink, which puts those nutrients back in your body after you empty yourself out on a long ride or in the heat. Um, and then, you know, my girlfriend's a certified yoga instructor. I don't do yoga as much as I should, but doing yoga, walking, doing other things to stretch your body out. You usually want to give yourself, after a hard event like that, you got to eat usually within an hour after the ride. Make sure you replenish your body. And then I'm usually starving the day after a ride. I do a long ride and I'll
Hmm.
go eat a horse the next day. But um, you just got to take it easy for a couple days. But I've done long rides, like the 4-day ride across Maryland. I rode, I think, about 75 miles each day and 100 miles the fourth day. And I felt great. At the end of the ride, I was like, cool. Because I hydrated, I drank, I ate along the way.
What are you eating while you're on the bike? Oh,
I
yeah, I
I
forgot
eat
to ask about
I
this.
eat like a Cliff Shot gel block, which again has
Okay.
nutrients, sodium, electrolytes. No, I'll stop and eat a cheesesteak, on a ride like that. I'll wolf down a hoagie or something. And you can eat a lot because you're burning like 3,000 calories on a day like that. You're just burning calories. You have to. So it's a science. I'm not a scientist. I'm not even a numbers guy. So it's a matter of taking in the right amount of calories for how much you're burning that energy. So you read about it, you learn about it, you figure it out after time. That's the trick.
Okay.
To not
So I've thought you would just be eating like Cliff
No,
bars and protein
no.
bars and things like that. You're just all
I'm
right. Stop and get
sure.
a hoagie.
Yeah,
I like
yeah.
it.
A lot of times I'll ride to a destination, have a good hamburger or something, or breakfast or whatever. I'll ride 15, 20 miles, have a sandwich, and ride home.
There you go. I
So
love it.
yeah,
So you've talked about this, or you've hinted and kind of mentioned this a few times. Was the uh, the relationships that you've built, the community. You mentioned a few folks you met, on
right.
Facebook that you've raced with. What's that community like? And is there a story you could share about someone that you've just met on the internet and you had a great experience with, or something like
Well,
that?
that one about climbing up that mountain, like I said, that was a bucket list ride. Now we're good friends on Facebook. I was out in Colorado this year, about 3 days after that, and I hooked up with her and said hi again. My friends from North Carolina, Greenville, South Carolina. I've been friends with them for like 3 years, and then last year we finally decided to get together in Virginia and do a weekend bike trip with I think it was like 6 or 8 of us. Had a great time, and then I said, "When are you coming up north to do the CNO?" So this summer they were up here, and I rode with them a couple days. So like you meet new people. One of their friends, one of the doctors, they're from North Carolina, and then they live in Puerto Rico part of the year. I'd love to go to Puerto Rico and do
Oh,
a ride sometime.
yeah,
So
that's
you
go
connect
ride in
you
the
connect with
rainforest.
these people like Laura and Robert in South Carolina. I'll go down this year and do a gravel race in South Carolina and hang out with them. So it's cool. My girlfriend's from Massachusetts, so I go up there. We're going up there for the holidays. I'll take my bike. I'll ride in Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire. I have a friend from Vermont who's actually grew up here where I'm from. He's coming down next week. I met him on a gravel team that I did the race in Kansas this summer, and now we're good friends. When he comes to see his mom, we'll go ride here on the trail. If I go to Vermont to my girlfriend's parents, we'll ride in Vermont when I go up there. So you make these connections, and it gives you this, oh,
Hmm.
I can't wait to go somewhere new. Show me some new places to ride and hang out with somebody that you met, whether it's Facebook or virtually
Yeah.
or whatever. So it,
That's really cool. I know it's hard to make friends and connections,
mm-hmm.
the older you get, when you're and just, after college, it's like, how am I going to make friends? It sounds like you've got that problem
Oh
figured
yeah,
out
yeah.
with
It's
your.
fun. I mean, when you go to a new event, like when I was in Kansas, I was there for 4 days this year. It's a really cool event. You have all the cycling companies are there with tents for like 4 days. I think there were 7,000 riders from all around the world there. So, I mean,
Wow.
and all the podcasters, all the YouTubers that cover cycling and races, they were all there. So you get interviewed with people, you meet these professional bike racers and stuff in the flesh. So that's really fun to me to go meet some of your
Hmm.
heroes and people that you follow online and stuff all the time. It's
Yeah.
cool.
And you mentioned your co-host was a connection that you made through, the cycling community, and was your coach. Can you tell us about your show? What do you, I
Yeah.
mean, the name is Bourbon Bikes and
Yeah.
Business. So,
So
but tell us more
a
about
couple
that.
months ago, Hank and I, we've been riding for years, 15 years now, and we live maybe about 20 minutes from each other. And we don't ride together all the time, but several times a year we do what he calls his birthday ride. We always go somewhere. I call it adventures with Hank because every time we go out, he gets a flat tire, or we get stranded somewhere, or in the Smoky Mountains or whatever. So another adventure with Hank. Anyway, he's a corporate lawyer, and we're riding in Lancaster. We were doing his birthday ride. I think it was late October it was, in Amish country. And we're riding along. He goes, "Hey, what do you think about doing a podcast? We've been together for years. We're always yakking about stuff." And I was like, that sounds cool. Because I do health insurance, so I'm on Zoom all the time. And I'm a photographer, by the way, too. I'm a photographer. But I said I need to up my studio game. So this will give me a reason to go buy messy equipment, right? So
Yeah, there you
I said, cool. What are we going to call it? He goes, well, we can talk about we're both small business people. We love to ride bikes, and we both like drinking bourbon. So how about Bourbon Bikes and Business? That sounds cool. So I said, well,
I love the
we'll do
alliteration.
the
I'll
show. We'll
say
have a
that.
sip of bourbon, talk about what we're bourbon, what's good about this, where you found it, and then we'll talk a topic on bicycling for a veteran or a beginner, and then at the end we give a tip for a self-employed small business owner, because a lot of people are leaving corporate America by the droves, wanting to do their own thing these days since COVID. So help people with
Hmm.
marketing tips, how to find business, things like that. So that's how we did it, and we're having a blast. It's just a lot of fun. I don't think we'll ever run out of
Yeah, that
content
sounds great.
with all the years of cycling and stuff. We're happy like this.
Yeah, it sounds like you've got an endless list of things to talk about, especially if you're continuing to do new races and you're riding every day. And I'm sure you're having all kinds of experiences like that. So where can folks find your
So
your
we're on
podcast?
every podcast, most all of them, Deezer, Amazon, Apple, Spotify, all the big ones, and then at Bourbon Bikes and Business. And then I post the podcast, and I give him the video, and he posts it to YouTube. So you can find us on YouTube under Bourbon Bikes and Business as well.
Mhm.
So if you check,
And are you on social media, on Twitter or X or Instagram?
I'm on Facebook and Instagram. You can find me on Instagram at Blaise Health Coverage. You can find me on Facebook. It's probably the best place at Blaise Nealon. It's BlaiseNealon. And then on Strava, if you want to follow my cycling adventures, you can find me at Blaise
Yeah.
at the Cycling Advisor on Strava. You can see where I'm riding next week. What else? So
that's the one where it you can draw the map.
yeah, it
Not draw the
tracks
map, but it
how
follows
fast
your
you're
ride.
going, where you're riding, all
Uh-huh.
that. So you can see everywhere I've ridden ever on there. But if you look at our latest episode 6 that we did last week, we decided we'd do tips for your favorite bourbon drinker, some gifts for Christmas. And then I have a long list of links online for shopping for bikes, new and used, for apparel, for shoes, for anything in general outdoors, even if you have a significant other that's into yoga, mountain climbing, runner. I've got some really good tips and some discounts on top of the regular prices. So, again, I've been doing this for years, shopping online, always looking for new places. So I'm giving out my favorite places that I shop online. I like good stuff, but I'm always looking for a deal,
Mm-hmm.
So check that
Yeah,
out.
this has been very inspiring. I feel like I want to hop on my bike and go ride by the river. Maybe not 20, 30, 40 miles, but
Start
a
with
nice
1 or
little
2, like I said earlier. And next thing you know, you'll be running 20 or 30 in no time. It's just go gradual.
Yeah, I think I was doing, when last summer, I would do between like 5 to 7, which I think is not bad, right? For an
My
amateur.
girlfriend will ride 10 or 15. That's about all she could take, so.
Okay.
But I don't
Very
mind.
cool.
I'll slow down and enjoy the scenery, ride with her occasionally. She's usually out running when I'm riding, but she'll ride occasionally with me once in a while. Well, I really appreciate you having me on the show today. It's been great, Colette.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, thank you so much for your insight. I'm sure we could talk for hours and hours about all your adventures, but best of luck to you out there. Stay safe.
Thanks. Yeah, you too.
Avoid those cars. Make sure, keep your left ribs intact.
Yeah. Stay healthy. Have a great holiday.
Yeah, you too. And thank you all to our listeners. Make sure you leave us a review and subscribe wherever you're listening to this podcast. Make sure to check us out on all the major social media platforms at 4040 Vision Pod. Thanks, everybody.
Great.
Thanks,
Take
Blaise.
care.